दिल में अब यूं तेरे भूले हुए गम आते हैं, जैसे बिछड़े हुए काबे में सनम आते हैं. The train was gone so quickly that it was hard to imagine. वो अपने दुखड़े शायरी में नहीं रोती, वो ना बिस्तर पर सरे शाम सैयों असी नैना दे आंखें लगे जिना पाक निगाहां हुइयां कहीं ना जान. आगे कहीं उसी लेवल पर एक काउंटर था जहां एक मर्द
I'm sorry that with better heed and judgment
पिघल पिघल कर गले से उतरेगा आखिरी कतरा दर्द का. 21वीं सदी की औरत अपने किसी चाहने वाले को खत नहीं लिखती. तुम्हारे 2 खत मिल गए. पहले खत में तुम्हारी नज़्म मिली, तुम्हारे दर्द की नज़्म. हर एक बात पे कहते हो तुम, जो हर पल तुम कि तू क्या है मैं जी रहा हूं. तुम ही कहो कि ये अंदाज़े गुफ्तगू क्या है. मैं हूं बा-अदब खूसट.
The innocent. It was a mistake to take Lola there. I knew it the moment we alighted from the train at the small country station. On an autumn evening, one remembers more of childhood than any other time of the year. And her bright, veneered face, the small bag, which hardly pretended to contain our things for the night, simply didn't go with the old grain warehouses across the small canal. The few lights up the hill, the posters of an ancient film. But she said, "Let's go into the country." And Bishop's Hendron was, of course, the first name which came into my head. Nobody would know me there now. And it hadn't occurred to me that it would be I who remembered. Even the old porter touched a chord. I said, "There'll be a 4-wheeler at the entrance." And there was, though at first I didn't notice it, seeing the 2 taxis and thinking, the old place is coming on. It was very dark, and thin autumn mist, the smell of wet leaves and canal water were deeply familiar. Lola said, "But why did you choose this place? It's grim." It was no use explaining to her why it wasn't grim to me. That sand heap by the canal, which had always been there. When I was 3, I remember, thinking it was what other people meant by the seaside. I took the bag. I've said it was light. It was simply a forged passport of respectability, and said we'd walk. We came up over the little humpbacked bridge and past the almshouse. When I was 5, I saw a middle-aged man run into one to commit suicide. He carried a knife, and all the neighbors pursued him up the stairs. She said, "I never thought the country was like this." There were ugly almshouses, little grey stone boxes, but I knew them as I knew nothing else. It was like listening to music, all that walk. But I had something to say to Lola. It wasn't her fault that she didn't belong here. We passed the school, the church, and came round into the old wide high street and the sense of the first 12 years of life. If I hadn't come, I shouldn't have known that sense would be so strong, because those years hadn't been particularly happy or particularly miserable. They had been ordinary years. But now, with the smell of wood fires, of the cold striking up from the dark, damp paving stones, I thought I knew what it was that held me. It was the smell of innocence. I said to Lola, "It's a good inn, and there'll be nothing here, you'll see, to keep us up. We'll have dinner and drinks and go to bed." But the worst of it was that I couldn't help wishing that I were alone. I hadn't been back all these years. I hadn't realized how well I remembered the place. Things I'd quite forgotten, like that sand heap, were coming back with an effect of pathos and nostalgia. I could have been very happy that night in a melancholy autumnal way, wandering about the little town, picking up clues to that time of life when, however miserable we are, we have expectations. It wouldn't be the same if I came back again, for then there would be the memories of Lola, and Lola meant just nothing at all. We had happened to pick each other up at a bar the day before and liked each other. Lola was all right. There was no one I would rather spend the night with. But she didn't fit in with these memories. We ought to have gone to Maidenhead. That's country too. The inn was not quite where I remembered it. There was the town hall, but they had built a new cinema with a Moorish dome and a cafe. And there was a garage, which hadn't existed in my time. I'd forgotten too the turning to the left up a steep, Willard hill. I don't believe the road was there in my days, I said. Your day? Lola asked. Didn't I tell you I was born here? You must get a kick out of bringing me here, Lola said. I suppose you used to think of nights like this when you were a boy. Yes, I said, because it wasn't her fault. She was all right. I liked her scent. She used a good shade of lipstick. It was costing me a lot. A $5 for Lola and then all the bills and fares and drinks, but I'd have thought it money well spent anywhere else in the world. I lingered at the bottom of that road. Something was stirring in the mind, but I don't think I should have remembered what if a crowd of children hadn't come down the hill at that moment into the frosty lamplight, their voices sharp and shrill, their breath fuming as they passed under the lamps. They all carried linen bags, and some of the bags were embroidered with initials. They were in their best clothes and a little self-conscious. The small girls kept to themselves in a kind of compact, beleaguered group, and one thought of hair ribbons and shining shoes and the sedate tinkle of a piano. It all came back to me. They had been to a dancing lesson, just as I used to go to a small square house with a drive of rhododendrons halfway up the hill. More than ever, I wished that Lola were not with me. Less than ever did she fit, as I thought, something's missing from the picture, and a sense of pain glowed dully at the bottom of my brain. We had several drinks at the bar, but there was half an hour before they would agree to serve dinner. I said to Lola, "You don't want to drag round this town. If you don't mind, I'll just slip out for 10 minutes and look at the place I used to know." She didn't mind. There was a local man, perhaps a schoolmaster, at the bar simply longing to stand her a drink. I could see how he envied me, coming down with her like this from town just for a night. I walked up the hill. The first houses were all new. I resented them. They hid such things as fields and gates I might have remembered. It was like a map which had got wet in the pocket and pieces had stuck together. When you opened it, there were whole patches hidden. But halfway up, there the house really was. The drive. Perhaps the same old lady was giving lessons. Children exaggerate age. She may not, in those days, have been more than 35. I could hear her piano. She was following the same routine. Children under 8, 6 to 7 p.m. Children 8 to 13, 7 to 8. I opened the gate and went in a little way. I was trying to remember. I don't know what brought it back. I think it was simply the autumn, the cold, the wet frosting leaves rather than the piano, which had played different tunes in those days. I remembered the small girl as well. One remembers anyone without a photograph to refer to. She was a year older than I was. She must have been just on the point of 8. I loved her with an intensity I have never felt since. I believe, for anyone. At least, I have never made the mistake of laughing at children's love. It has a terrible inevitability of separation because there can be no satisfaction. Of course, one invents tales of houses on fire, of war and forlorn charges which prove one's courage in her eyes, but never of marriage. One knows without being told that that can't happen, but the knowledge doesn't mean that one suffers less. I remembered all the games of blind man's buff at birthday parties when I vainly hoped to catch her so that I might have the excuse to touch and hold her. But I never caught her. She always kept out of my way. But once a week, for 2 winters, I had my chance. I danced with her. That made it worse. It was cutting off our only contact when she told me during one of the last lessons of the winter that next year she would join the older class. She liked me too, I knew it, but we had no way of expressing it. I used to go to her birthday parties and she would come to mine, but we never even ran home together after the dancing class. It would have seemed odd, I don't think it occurred to us. I had to join my own boisterous, teasing male companions, and she, the besieged, the hustled, the shrilly indignant sex on the way down the hill. I shivered there in the mist and turned my coat collar up. The piano was playing a dance from an old C.B. Cochrane review. It seemed a long journey to have taken to find only Lola at the end of it. There is something about innocence which is never quite resigned to lose. Now when I'm unhappy about a girl, I can simply go and buy another one. Then the best I could think of was to write some passionate message and slip it into a hole. It was extraordinary how I began to remember everything in the woodwork of the gate. I had once told her about the hole, and sooner or later, I was sure, she would put in her fingers and find the message. I wondered what the message could have been. One wasn't able to express much, I thought, in those days. But because the expression was inadequate, it didn't mean that the pain was shallower than what one sometimes suffered now. I remembered how for days I had felt in the hole and always found the message there. Then the dancing lesson stopped. Probably by the next winter I had forgotten. As I went out of the gate, I looked to see if the hole existed. It was there. I put in my finger. In its safe shelter from the seasons and the years, the scrap of paper rested yet. I pulled it out and opened it. It was a shock to see, by my diminutive flame, a picture of crude obscenity. There could be no mistake. There were my initials below the childish, inaccurate sketch of a man and a woman. But it woke fewer memories than the fume of breath, the linen bags, a damp leaf, or the pile of sand. I didn't recognize it. It might have been drawn by a dirty-minded stranger on a lavatory wall. All I could remember was the purity, the intensity, the pain of that passion. I felt at first as if I had been betrayed. After all, I told myself, Lola's not so much out of place here. But later that night, when Lola turned away from me and fell asleep, I began to realize the deep innocence of that drawing. I had believed I was drawing something with a meaning and beautiful. It was only now, after 30 years of life, that the picture seemed obscene.